Hello students, welcome to the course NPTEL course Visual Communication Design for Digital Media. This is the second module, and in this module we will discuss elements of design. So second and third module will concentrate on the visual communication design part. In the second module we will talk about the elements of design, and the third module we will talk about the principles. So what are the elements of design? Elements of design, we have 5 elements of design: line, shape, volume and space, texture or pattern and color. So line is one dimensional, shape has 2 different dimensions, volume and space is when we talk about 3 dimensional spaces, and texture and pattern are the surface rendering process. So texture and pattern, and then the color will also create a difference in the surface. So these are the tools, the basic tools with which we can create different kind of visual designs. So it can, visual design can range from as we know, from 3-dimensional art and crafts to architecture to 2-dimensional painting, as well as digital media. So in terms of digital media as well, we have these 5 elements, and with the permutation combination of all these elements we can create different kind of visual design, and applying the principles of design we can create different typologies of design. So first element is line. So how do we define the line in visual design? So line is a point in motion. So it has only one dimension theoretically. So line only consists one dimension, but in terms of visual design it can have different kind of width. So in the right hand side corner we can see different kind of lines, but in terms of geometry some of these will be called as shapes because it has some width. It is not exactly one dimensional. But in terms of visuals, visual art and visual communication design, these actually will be classified as lines, because this has a single direction, one direction, and it has a motion. So in this slide we can see what are the different how line helps in visual communication. So first of all, line conveys a mood or feeling. So that is the first usage of line. So in this slide we can see some design of the famous designer, automobile designer Daniel Simons, from his it's taken from the book Cosmic Motors. On the right hand side we can see a two-wheeler designed with sharp line which conveys motion, and on the left hand side we can see a very sketchy design, concept design of a spaceship. So how lines can be used in visual communication design? So first usage of line is to convey mood or feeling. So though a line has only one dimension, it can convey different meaning. Many adjectives can be attributed in the line, like free, nervous, angry, happy, quiet, excited, calm, graceful, etc. So if we see in this picture on the right hand corner, both the pictures are taken from the book Cosmic Motors by Daniel Simon. On the right hand corner we can see a two-wheeler designed by him, and on the left hand side we can see a concept sketch of a spaceship. So this in the right hand corner is a very final design, has a lot of detailing, and we can see a very sharp line which has motion, and on the left hand corner we can see a concept design. So lines are very shaky, and has a lot of lines are overlaid on each on top of each other. And if we see the smoke emitting from that spaceship, the line quality is completely different. The line doesn't have that sharp and sleek nature which we have on the right hand side's final design. So in another example, this is a concept design by Alan Lee, who is the concept designer of Lord of the Rings movie. So here we can see an concept design of Rivendell's palace. So here the line quality is completely different. Here in the corner we can see that the curvilinear lines which has a lot of ornate characteristics, and the strokes are absolutely different if we compare with the design of the motor. And here the second property of line is it can delineate the shape and form. So lines important characteristics, so it defines a form. So in the right hand corner, if we see, it defines three geometric form. So if here it is actually these are shapes, but at the corner, at the border, there is a line. And here in this picture we can see it depicts a cityscape of an old city. So there doesn't exist any mass, any color, any texture, but only through the line we can get the feeling of the space. So if we talk about the typologies of line, there are three different types of line. One is actual line, another is implied line, another is psychic line. So if we talk about actual lines are lines which exist, which we can see. So in this example we can see in this example where we can see two fishes, these lines which depicts waves are actually existing, though it can vary in weight and it can have different characteristics. So here we can have a sketchy characteristics of line which resembles the brush, watercolor brush stroke of the line. So this is an actual line, and also in this right hand corner we can see a doodling. So these single line drawings are actually line which depicts a shape, which gives depicts a shape or form. So here these are the example of implied line. Implied lines can might not be a continuous line, and there can be some points in between and or some objects in between, and so we psychologically create the line. So in this example on the left hand side we can see an page layout designed page layout from the book Making and Breaking of Grid. So in this page we can see this Kandinsky's poster, yellow poster, and this logo are aligned on a same line. Even the text, if we see, so the top horizontal red line is not existent, but here we psychologically create that line and we join that line, and that line appears in that design. Similarly, if we see these vertical lines here, so these lines are not there, but the alignment of text and the photograph creates this line. Similarly, this is an example, this is designed by one of the student here in architecture department. Here we can see these dotted lines. So dotted lines are not actually lines, these are dots, but this creates a vertical continuity and creates a implied line. So the third type of line is psychic lines. So psychic lines are implied lines. So here there is no existence of line, there is no point, but the composition creates a movement of user's eye, and that users psychologically follow up a line which doesn't exist in the picture. So if we see in this picture, so the person is looking at his hand. So here in the red line depicts the implied line of user's eye movement. So this is psychic line is actually user's eye movement in the composition where there doesn't exist any line. So here in this example we can see three different kind of lines is coexisting. So here we can see continuous lines, these horizontal lines can be as actual lines, and here we can see a lot of dots which are closely spaced, and it creates a linearity. So these are implied lines, and if we see the complete composition from the center has that focal point, and from the center all these leaves are radiating. So these are actually psychic lines. So users eye attention first comes here in the center, and from there user start to look from the out at the corner of the composition. So types of lines can also be determined as the way it defines the form or shape. So one can be contour line and another can be gesture line. So contour line actually defines a shape or form. So it actually follows the outer boundary of a shape or form, but gesture line just flows freely. So in this example, this is a good example of a contour line and gesture line. So on the left hand side in Daniel Simon's automobile design, the line, if you can see, are actually following the edge of a shape or form. So this is actually a contour line. So it clearly defines the contour of the shape and form. But here in the concept design of Alan Lee's, the concept artist of Lord of the Rings, here in this character design, he actually doesn't create a line which follows the outer boundary of a shape. It freely comes within the shape and goes outside and creates a feeling of the line. So it more or less concentrates on the characteristics of the line, the mood of the line, and contour line concentrates delineates the outer shape of the form. So the next element of design is shape. The shape is two-dimensional. Line was one-dimensional. Right now we are moving to the shape, which is two-dimensional. So how do we define shape in visual communication design? Shape is a visually perceived area created either by an enclosing line or by color or value change. So it can be either a line outline of a shape, or there can be just a color or value change, and which can be appeared as a shape. So shape can also be called as a form in a non-technical way, but form generally is associated with three-dimensional. It connotes a three-dimensional space, but shape is two-dimensional. So the term shape is in this sense more specific, and when we talk about shape, the meaning of shape comes later, but seeing a shape is primary. So and meaning of the shape can be highly contextual, and when it communicates with the user, then the context specific meaning can be different to the different users. So there are different types of shapes. First we can differentiate a shape between two categories. One is rectilinear shapes, another is curvilinear shapes. So here we can see in the first example, we can see Guernica by Pablo Picasso, the famous painter, and here we have a lot of angular characteristics of shape, lot of angles and straight lines are there. So this Guernica is actually Pablo Picasso's one drawing which falls under Cubist movement. So Cubist movement generally has a lot of rectilinear characteristics, which has a lot of straight lines, angular features. But here we have, on the other hand, we have William Morris's design, which is which falls in the art and craft movement. So here we can see a lot of curvilinear shapes, which are which has less angles but more curves. So to define, we can say rectilinear shapes being more angular and linear suggest geometry and hence appear artificial and manufactured. But on the other way, curvilinear shapes provide us with a lot of freedom. Curvilinear shape can also be geometric. For example, if we draw circles, ellipse and parabolic shapes, which are curvilinear shapes, but which are geometric shapes. So shapes can also be defined as a positive or negative. So what are the positive shapes? Positive shapes are also considered as figure, and negative shapes are also considered as ground. So positive shapes has a lot of intricacy and has more subject matter. So in this example, we can see a Kandarpa Hasti, which is a drawing of Patachitra, drawing taken from Raghurajpur Patachitra, and the artisan is Prabhakar Badal. So here we can see a Kandarpa Hasti. There are a lot of women who forms the elephant. So that is the figure, and as a background we can see the black background which has a tree and a lot of floral ornamentation there, which acts as a background or negative space. So here the positive space is the elephant and negative space is the ornate background, which is colored in black and gray. So which also positive and negative space should be integrated. So if these two spaces are not so well integrated, the composition doesn't look interesting. So negative areas are if the negative areas are more interesting, then positive and negative integration improves. And most common device is to repeat a color in the positive which is present in the positive space into the negative spaces. So if we go back to that example, we can see there are a lot of brown color here in the positive space, which we can see a small repetition here. If you see clearly, there is a bird there which is also colored brown, and here in the foreground we can also see there are a lot of the ground is colored, the color used for the ground is also brown. So there is a continuity from the figure to ground and the positive and negative space. So these positive and negative space are coherent. So there can be a positive negative confusion in the space as well. So because of the familiarity of the positive as well as the negative shape, there can be a confusion between which one is the user can be confused between which shape is positive and which shape is negative, and both the positive and negative shape can act as a can simultaneously can be felt as a both are positive spaces. So this principle is called gestures principles, which we will discuss later in the different modules. So and it can appear that negative area does not even exist. So if we look at the example here, so this is Escher's Metamorphosis, taken from the composition of Escher's Metamorphosis 2, and this is actually a long painting, and this is a portion of the painting. This is a very long painting. So here Escher shows a metamorphosis and evolution of animal kingdom. So here we can see there are fish, and fish transforms into bird. But if we see clearly, the fish initially appears as a positive space figure, and the black part actually appears as the background or the negative space. But it gradually from the left hand side to the right hand side transforms the background, the negative space gradually transforms into a bird, and the fish, the positive space, the white spaces actually diminishes and doesn't on the right hand side they don't even exist, and again they take a form of a brown bird, and they then another kind of figure reappears. So there is a confusion between positive and negative space altogether in this composition. Also in the corner, right hand side corner, we can see either a female face or a person playing a saxophone. So sometimes we perceive the white space as a figure, sometimes white shape as a figure, sometimes we perceive black shape as a figure. So another way of dividing shape into two different categories is geometric and biomorphic. So geometric is a lot of geometrical shapes will be there, and biomorphic lot of natural and biological shapes will be there. So we can also call that organic shape will be there. So on the left hand side, if we look at the Piet Mondrian's famous painting Broadway Boogie Woogie, we can see a lot of geometric shapes. Here there are he played with rectangles and squares which are absolutely geometric. And on the right hand side we can see Salvador Dali's painting. Salvador Dali was a surrealist painter, and his painting, in this painting we can see a lot of biomorphic elements, a lot of curvilinear shapes. But as we discussed, all the curvilinear shapes are not always biomorphic, it can also be geometric. So in this example which is present in the middle of the presentation by John Miro, we can see a lot of circles which are actually geometric shapes, and a lot of rectangles which are geometric, and as well as there are a lot of free flowing curves which are biomorphic. So John Miro's example which also which has biomorphic as well as geometric shapes, but Salvador Dali's painting has a lot of biomorphic shapes, but on the other hand Piet Mondrian's design is absolutely geometric. So shape can be either geometric or biomorphic. Here we can see on the right hand side we have Salvador Dali's painting Geopolitica's Child, which is from the art movement of surrealism, and on the left hand side we have Piet Mondrian's Broadway Boogie Woogie, which is under Deistijl art movement. So in the left hand side in Piet Mondrian's painting we can see a lot of geometric shapes, which is square and rectangle. He played with the composition of square and rectangle. And in Salvador Dali he didn't use much geometric shapes. The most shapes are biomorphic, which comes from the natural origin, which is organic in nature. So in between we have John Mirro's composition of abstract composition, where we can see rectangles, lines, and as well as circles, which is also geometric shape but curvilinear geometric shapes. And also we have free flowing curves, which is biomorphic. So this John Mirro's composition is a comprises of geometric as well as biomorphic shapes, but John Mirro's Piet Mondrian's composition is completely geometric, and Salvador Dali's composition is more of a biomorphic shapes. So if we talk about shape association, either a shape can be a reminiscent of an abstract known object. So abstraction of a known object can be depicted with a shape which has a narrative association, narrative connotation, but also it can have no meaning. Just it can be the shape can be solely of a aesthetic purpose. So a lot of 21st century artists, they forces the user to look as a visual composition as just as a aesthetic composition. So in this composition by Kandinsky, we can see a lot of geometric shapes which doesn't have any narrative association. But on the other hand, we have a Bengal Patachitra by artisan Moyna Chitrakar, which each and every shapes has a meaning, and which conveys which is associated with a known object, in this case human being and trees and other musical instruments. So next element of design is texture or pattern. Texture and pattern, they can be used synonymously, but texture and pattern has slight differences. So to define them, we can say they refer a repetitive design motifs. So when a design motifs are repeated several times, that can be called as a pattern or texture. But texture can refer to a surface quality. It has a haptic characteristics or sense of touch. So even when we do not actually feel the object, we can have the haptic communication through the texture. So the difference between texture and pattern, there is a faint difference between texture and pattern. So pattern is actually a regular repetition of design motifs. When the design motifs are repeated in regular interval, that is called pattern. And texture too has a repetition, but the repetition is less perceivable and does not have a similar regular interval. So here we have some examples of pattern and texture. So first example, these examples are taken from a Bengal Patachitra, and the photographs are taken from Moyna Chitrakar's different paintings. So first one is a fish scale, which has a regular repetition of same design motifs. So it can be of pattern, but here we can see this texture of hair and texture of wood wardrobe. These are actually textures, these are not patterns. So the repetitions are not so regular. Here another example, the previous example we have the example which is hand drawn, and here we have more geometric geometric pattern and digitally manufactured and digitally designed motifs. So these are Art Deco texture patterns. So these patterns are created flourished during Art Deco movement, and we can see regular interval of same design motifs. So these are actually examples of pattern. Here we have some examples of texture. On the right hand side, we can these are a screenshot of animation design, stop motion animation design, and this is a screenshot of a game design. So here we can see a grunge texture, and which has watercolor effect in the right hand side. On the left hand side, we have a similar grunge texture, but which gives a texture of a linograph and woodcut painting, but not so literally, but tries to mimic that kind of texture. And texture can be defined in two different way, divided in two different way. One is tactile texture and another is visual texture. In digital design, in visual communication design, in digital media, we can only use visual texture, because tactile texture is associated with the material when the texture is actually there. So we can touch and feel the texture. So the example will be a brick cladding or exposed brick wall. So here we have an example of architecture. So the exposed brick wall gives a texture of brick, and exposed concrete also gives a texture of concrete, raw concrete. So this is from a brutalist movement, photograph of a safety university. So this is an example of tactile texture. We can touch and feel the texture. But in terms of visual design, we can only use visual texture. But visual texture is can be achieved by changing hue and value. Those are the attributes of color difference, and an illusion of texture can be created. So this is actually not a texture, an illusion of a texture, so which doesn't exist physically, but when we see, we can have a feeling of texture. So it evokes a haptic perception through though there is no undulation on the surface. So these are some examples. So skeuomorphism is a style which first started by iOS design. So here we have the visual texture of wood, and also the buttons have a shiny glossy texture because of the hue and color variation. So we can see that there is a we can see and perceive there is a haptic sensation of wood as well as this metallic finish through the in the style of skeuomorphism. This skeuomorphism will be discussed later in the different modules. So here, to sum up, we can have some examples which plays with shape, line and texture. In this example on the right side, we can see a lot of sketchy lines. These buttons and tabs are delineated with sketchy lines. So these are very shaky lines are used, and there are texture which mimics the texture of a canvas, and which gives a different kind of feeling of this UI design. On the other hand, we have a very strong geometric line quality, flat color, which has another kind of visual style. And here we have two different examples of the first example is from skeuomorphism of Apple, and this the second example is of material design of Google. So these two are completely different. Here in the Google's material design, we can see very angular shapes, geometric and rectilinear shapes, and in Apple's design we can see some curve angles, and a lot of visual textures are used.